Welcome everyone to another Cav and Carey Press reading. We've been holding these readings together since last year, and we were thinking of doing these before COVID. Once COVID happened and we all were at home, this was a perfect opportunity to keep this reading series going, to bring Cav and Carey Press poetry into your various kitchens and bedrooms and living rooms and different spaces. I am Dimitri Reyes, the Marketing and Communications Director, and I am from New Jersey, just like the press. This evening, we have a great series of poets here, two wonderful women as we celebrate Women's History Month. We have Kali Lightfoot on the East Coast, publishing her first book of poetry. So just give a bit of a round of applause for that. It is always such a gift to give the world your gift of words. And we are so happy for Callie. And that book is beautiful. For those of you who've seen it and hadn't seen it yet, Gabriel Cleveland, our managing editor, will be putting the links in the chat box throughout the evening. Callie, you could save on her book 20% right now until the pre-order is done on April 6th. So definitely secure your copy when you can. And we also have Andrea Ross out in the West Coast with us this evening. She's our memoirist with a wonderful, wonderful book called Unnatural Selection. And you're going to be hearing from her tonight, and you'll be hearing from her first. So let me give you the rundown of the evening. Thank you, Andrea, for holding up your book. I am going to introduce each author. They'll read for about 15 minutes. Afterwards, I'll introduce the other author. That author will read for 15 minutes. Throughout the evening, if there's anything you hear that is wonderful, beautiful, captivating, takes your breath away, please put that in the chat box so everyone can share in that love. And when that author is finished, they can also check those comments. Also throughout the evening, at the end of the day, we are going to have a Q&A. So if you have any wonderful questions, any thought-provoking questions, also put that in the chat box. And after both readings are done, we will issue that Q&A. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Andrea Ross. Okay. Wait, hold on. I'm gonna do your bio first. I got it. Okay. I was like, that's not my email. Okay. Once a Park Service ranger and wilderness guide, Andrea Ross now teaches writing at UC Davis. She has been awarded several California Arts Council residencies and a fellowship at the Mesa Refuge. Her work can be found in Plowshares, Terrain, and Cafe Review, and the Dirtbag Diaries podcast. She lives in Davis, California with her husband and son, and you can find out more at AndreaRossWriter.com. Now, without further ado, here's Andrea Ross.
Thank you, Dimitri. And thank you all for being here tonight. For some of us, it's still today because I'm on the West Coast. But it's a pleasure to be here. The press hosted a reading for me and another writer last month. And it was just delightful the way that you run the readings. And so I'm really thrilled to be back here and to see so many people here. So I started the last reading with my first chapter of the book because it was my sort of pre-launch and I wanted to kind of start at the beginning and go from there. But I selected a different excerpt for tonight. And it's actually the third chapter of the book. And the ground it covers really only requires that so far that you know that I'm 20 years old in it. And I have recently been diagnosed with a chronic illness. Everything else I think you can pick up. So it's called Non-Identified. During my high school summers, I had been an assistant counselor at a Girl Scout camp. Although at the time I hadn't really been interested in the camping part of the job. Instead, I wanted independence from my parents and relief from the hot boredom of summer in my hometown. I wanted a paycheck and a challenge. At the Girl Scout camp, I found those things and more. Everyone on staff was female. There were no boys to flirt with, so my psyche was freed up to do other things. I wrote and directed plays for my group of campers called Meadow Murphs. and made up songs and skits and performed them at nightly campfires, and learned to live in a little 2-person canvas tent for 3 months. Per Girl Scout tradition, each counselor had to give herself a nickname. I shared a tent with the head counselor, a college student who had nicknamed herself
Andrea, you're on mute.
do I have to start all over?
Oh, no. Maybe start 3 lines up.
Okay. Per Girl Scout tradition, each counselor had to give herself a camp nickname. I shared a tent with the head counselor, a college student who had nicknamed herself Lifer because, as she explained, she loved life. I was skeptical of her sunny optimism. I had nicknamed myself Bug, which speaks volumes about how I felt about myself. But Lifer was the real deal. She really did love life. Plus, she was smart and kind and funny, and I found myself wanting to be like her. She had long blonde hair and squinty eyes from smiling and from being outside. She didn't seem to care much about what she looked like or how she dressed, but she radiated beauty and confidence and compassion. She was far beyond all the high school pettiness and self-consciousness that I was embroiled in. Yet she treated me as an equal, and I was grateful for the opportunity to be myself that summer. I liked our little canvas platform tent with old army cots in it. It was like having my own house for the first time, but Lifer slept outside the tent every night. I love having no walls between me and the outdoors, she told me when I asked her why she didn't sleep in the tent. I didn't understand. But the more I hung out with Lifer, the more I learned to love living outdoors. 4 years later, I found myself wanting to duck back into that lifestyle. I was now about the age that Lifer had been when I met her. Could I become more like her by working at a camp again? Could I rekindle in myself that sense of equanimity and joy of belonging in my environs that I had experienced when I was with her? A month before I got sick, I had attended a summer job fair on campus and interviewed for a position as a counselor at a wilderness camp. During the interview with the camp's director, I tried channeling Lifer's confidence and competence. And even though I had never backpacked before, I got a job guiding backpack trips for teenagers along the trails of California's Coast Range. I signed the contract before I got sick. As my semester ended, I began to wonder whether I could do the job. But I wanted to ignore my symptoms, my fatigue and aching joints, and go out into the coastal mountains and prove myself. A few weeks before my lease ended, I began packing my things into storage before showing up at summer camp for work. Something about living among the chaos of all my belongings scattered in and around boxes all over my room gave me an extra push to try to cultivate some internal organization in my life. I threaded the telephone cord out my bedroom window and climbed onto the patio in our tiny yard. I grabbed a mildewed patio chair and sat down as the city bus rolled by, shaking the ground beneath me like an earthquake. Nestled among the calla lilies that grew in the yard, I took a deep breath and dialed the number for Lutheran Social Services in Denver. A caseworker named Danielle answered the phone. I explained my health crisis to her and asked her to look through my records for any health history of inflammation, arthritis, or worse. She said she'd send me what she could. A week later, I received in the mail a short excerpt from the agency's records, which revealed only that my maternal grandmother had suffered from varicose veins. I called Danielle back and she explained that there was very little medical information in my file. So she also told me about something called non-identifying information. There's a document that we can release to you if you request it. It contains information about the circumstances surrounding your birth, minus any identifying names or details, she said. I squirmed. You have information about my birth mother? Yes, Danielle said. The document would be excerpted from the information she gave us when she placed you for adoption. At that moment, I was more concerned with finding the cause of the pain in my body rather than the circumstances surrounding my birth. I didn't think I needed any non-medical information, so I thanked her and ended the phone call. Instead of pursuing my genes, I attempted to exorcise whatever evil thing had taken place in my joints by trying to outpace it. I bought a mountain bike to try pedaling up the hilly trails near the summer camp. I figured over time, surrounded by coast redwood trees, I would grow a little stronger. When I arrived at camp, I didn't tell anyone I was sick. I didn't ask for a lighter assignment. I didn't say anything at all. I just showed up to counselor training with one of those soft pack cloth suitcases that converts into a backpack, several kinds of anti-inflammatory medications, some cheap hiking boots I bought at a sporting goods store, and my secret illness. I felt anxious about my disability, guilty for not disclosing it, and worried about my rookie status as a backpacker. The rheumatologist had diagnosed me with some sort of inflammatory arthritis, but it was still inconclusive. And there I was at camp, hoping to regain some vestigial sense of self that had drained away since I had gotten sick. The camp was located in the dry, sunny foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Our group base camped in a grove of madrones and oaks where we taught campers how to make tea from curls of cinnamon-colored madrone bark and pillows filled with mugwort leaves. We led them on trips along the ridgelines of Big Basin State Park and through its redwoods. Trekking was a struggle since I was still anemic, and thinking was difficult too. I was so fatigued. During our first backpacking trip, as I hiked along with my silly suitcase backpack strapped to my body, enormous blisters formed on each of my big toes. When I removed my boots, the blisters protruded like little balloons, painful ones. I tried layering moleskin around them to pad them to no avail. The first day back in camp, both of my humongous blisters popped. I led the subsequent backpacking trip with raw toes. New blisters formed in the same places. Desperate, I borrowed someone's Swiss Army knife and cut 2 round holes in the sides of my cheap boots. My toes felt better, but my shoes looked ridiculous. The upside was I didn't have a lot of energy to be embarrassed about my rookie status. The intermittent fog of the coastal mountains we hiked through mirrored my own mental state. At first, it was all I could do to get through the long days of camp counseling. But over the course of the summer, with the help of cortisone pills the rheumatologist had prescribed, the pain subsided to a tolerable level, and I regained some of my energy. Coastal California summers are virtually rain-free, so we slept outside every night. During the periods between treks, when our group stayed in our little base camp in the grove, I carried my sleeping bag to a clearing near the campfire and settled in to look up at the night sky, its vast constellations like so many blood cells pulsing through the universe, each one containing unique flaws and mysteries. One night, I held up my left thumb and inspected it in the moonlight. As a child, I had sucked it, envisioning myself as a baby, curled fetally and floating in outer space amid twinkling stars, with my umbilicus threading out from my belly, connected to nothing. I wondered who my real belly button had been connected to. I believed my thumb enabled me to communicate with the aliens I had probably come from. Thumb sucking a direct phone line connecting me to the universe and to whoever might be looking for me out there and wanting to bring me back to the mothership. I could not understand why anyone would want to keep me from sucking my thumb, but when I entered kindergarten, my parents and teachers told me to stop. No one gave me a good reason, and they didn't know what they were missing. The adults in my life became increasingly fervent in their insistence that I cease and desist, so my thumb and I had to go underground. I did whatever I could to hide my habit, but I had no intention of stopping. Teachers wrote "thumb sucker" in scarlet letters on my report cards, and I felt ashamed, but not enough to stop. The way I saw it, there were no negative consequences except scorn from adults. What finally turned the thumb sucking tide? When I was 10, an orthodontist told me, if you don't stop sucking your thumb, your teeth will never be straight. Maybe I was ready to accept the responsibility of being a member of the outer world and to let go of that part of my inner world. Or maybe it was just that the orthodontist had finally offered the logical reason I needed to change my behavior. I stopped cold turkey, never returning to it. Lying under the stars at the wilderness camp, I wished I still sucked my thumb, or at least that I could regain that feeling of connection with the universe. I was an alien with no way to make contact, a little adopted girl who felt disconnected and didn't know why. The next day, I sent a letter to the adoption agency requesting my non-identifying information. When the document arrived in the mail, I drove to a cafe in town that had thick coffee and wait staff who never bothered me no matter how long I sat there. My stomach churned as I clutched 3 typewritten pages describing my biological parents' ages, weights, heights, and hobbies at the time of my birth, as well as descriptions of their immediate family members. I spread the pages before me on a wobbly table. Seeing my genetic and cultural heritage condensed to 3 sparse pages of text made my stomach drop. Was that all there was to me? And my insides felt like they were vibrating. I had origins. According to the document, my birth mother was 18 years old and 5 feet 7 inches tall. She had hazel eyes, was of Norwegian extraction on both sides of her family, and was an only child. I blinked rapidly. I had never guessed that I was half Norwegian. People had told me I looked French, Native American, any number of things. Others told me I looked just like my adoptive mom and dad, who were Finnish and Scottish, respectively. I had never considered I might be Norwegian. What did it mean? Was I a Viking? I learned that my birth mother got allergies from pollen in the springtime and liked to play the piano. The note said she was always a B student who liked to write poetry in her spare time and was on a swim team in high school. She had completed 2 quarters of college before needing to make plans related to her pregnancy. The notes also mentioned that my birth parents met through friends and attended the same college. They dated steadily for a while before she became pregnant, and it was upsetting to her when she learned that my birth father married another woman who was also pregnant 8 months before I was born. I stopped reading, stomach wobbling from this unexpected turn and too much coffee. I'd never guessed I might have a half sibling, almost the same age as me. What kind of a man would get 2 girls pregnant at the same time, I wondered, a lump in my throat forming as I thought about my birth mother as the not chosen girl. Now I knew we were both not chosen girls. I felt a new affinity to her, and I finally had a few pieces of the puzzle of my history. It was like a game of Clue, a mystery to solve. The note said my birth father was aware of my birth mother's pregnancy and admitted paternity, but her parents did not want him involved with her or the pregnancy in any way. I felt even sicker to my stomach. What had happened? Were they cruel, angry, overwhelmed? I read on. When I was born, my birth father was 22 years old. He was described as a good-looking young man with light brown wavy hair and brown eyes, who was large-boned and athletic, playing football in high school. He quit college when he got married to the other pregnant girl and began working with his father in an irrigation supply business to support his new family. My birth father had left to live another life without my birth mother or me. My ribs tightened, my breath quickened. The cafe staff had begun wiping down the tables around me, getting ready to close up for the night. I gathered my papers, now slightly greasy from pieces of old croissants on the table, and slumped into the evening. As I walked to my car, I realized that despite the initial thrill of reading the document and the shocking news that I had a half sibling somewhere who was almost a twin, I still knew nothing about the inflammatory arthritis I seemed to have developed or of any other genetic disease. Also, the information seemed whitewashed. What middle-class Caucasian teenage girl in the 1960s didn't play piano? What red-blooded American boy didn't play football? It was difficult to imagine those faces, personalities, or home lives. They seemed like caricatures, drawn with a quick, broad stroke. The adoption agency had done its job well. This was truly non-identifying information. I wondered if the social workers had fabricated these facts, or at least changed some of the details from the original records they had to shroud the truth. Nonetheless, it was the first information I'd received about my biological origins. And during the course of the summer, I read the pages over and over, looking for snippets of familiarity. I had sandy blonde hair and greenish brown eyes. I liked playing piano. I liked writing poetry. Perhaps I had gotten those attributes from them. But did they love the outdoors? Were they kind? Were they alive? At camp, the summer wound down. My illness had left me so fatigued, I had little spare energy to be fun for my campers and nothing left to give my fellow counselors. I had made it through the season as a backpacking guide, but just barely, trudging through the summer, carrying my suitcase backpack, learning wilderness skills on the fly. I knew I hadn't really pulled my weight. I was not the backpacking guide I had pictured myself becoming before I got sick. After saying goodbye, I drove back to college through late summer shadows, accompanied by the documents from the adoption agency, which had stoked a tiny ember of determination. I was ready to tackle my final 2 years of college and to spend them with a new kind of mindfulness of my body and my desire to belong. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It is a gift to hear you again and again. As a reminder, everyone, Andrea is celebrating the launch of her book, Unnatural Selection. So if you are interested in anything you heard, please put that in the chat box down below. Please purchase the book, review the book. Reviews are so important for authors, and just share that with others that you know. Without further ado, let me please introduce to you Kali Lightfoot. Kali Lightfoot lives in Salem, Massachusetts. She worked as a teacher, wilderness ranger in Washington State, executive at Rhodes Scholar, and most recently as founding executive director of the National Resource Center for Osher Lifelong Learning Institutes. Lightfoot earned an MFA in creative writing from the Vermont College of Fine Arts in 2015. Her poetry has appeared in journals and anthologies and been nominated for Pushcart Prizes by Lavender Review and Poetry South and Best of the Net by Star 82 Review. Kali received an honorable mention in the SEPA Speculative Poetry Contest, and she has written reviews of poetry books for Broadsided Press, The Hopper, and Solstice. Please introducing, I said that wrong. Now welcoming Kali Lightfoot. Yay. Hold on, Kali. Let me make sure that you are not muted. There you go.
Yep. Okay.
We
Well,
hear you.
I had a camp name. I was a Girl Scout camp counselor for 14 years. And I will go to my grave before I will tell you what that camp name was. There isn't anyone on this call that knew me back then, so I think I'm safe. I want to thank Kevin Carey Press for this amazing thing that they took my book and have put it into form as such a beautiful object in the world that I'm just really waiting to see and hold in my hands. I also have a lot of friends on this call and elsewhere who had a huge hand in making this book a reality, and I want to thank all of them as well. It does take a village to be a poet, I have discovered over the last few years. The book itself is dedicated to Betsy Scholl, and I saw Betsy's little square down on the corner. It says, in the book, it says, to Betsy Scholl, teacher and friend. And I feel quite blessed to have her in my life. She's what started me on the road into getting an MFA and having a book. So I am going to start with a poem from that is something that happened when I was about 10, but I didn't write the poem until I was about 69. So, Cousin Margaret's Friend, 1955. Cousin Margaret opened her door, smiling, a sweater wrapped tight around her. She spoke of the chill in Miami that day, pale, fey woman, shy with us, her cousins from the north, an exotic bird who might at any moment disappear. Margaret's friend lightly touched her shoulder, then filled the space beside her, smiled, and shook my father's hand. They led us to the parlor for coffee and pie. We balanced china plates and cups, the adults catching up. The friend promised to take me to her pet store, making her my hero. I, the kid who rescued sick birds from our yard back home. Later, my dad and the friend went out back, laughing together, ripping the husks from coconuts on a sharpened metal stake, tall and lethal. Next morning after breakfast, a young man knocked, whisked into the parlor by Margaret's friend, murmuring head to head, poring over charts. Her bookie, my mom whispered. She's betting on the horses. We all went to Hialeah racetrack that afternoon. That was years before Cousin Margaret died. A bum ticker, my dad said. Margaret's friend sat in her car outside her pet store with an old rag stuffed into the exhaust pipe. Mom and Dad just clucked their tongues and exchanged the glance when they heard the news. Half my life went by before I understood. Now, I too have loved a woman and lost her to death, but not to silence. I wish I could sit in the parlor with Margaret's friend, ask how they met, ask about their life together, push aside the china cups and take her hand. I wish I knew her name. So that was my mom's side of the family. And my dad's side, I think most of you on this call know that I'm a lesbian. And my dad's side of the family is possibly responsible for the fact I'm also a recovering alcoholic. And I'm finding it really ironic that I am reading for the first time from my book on St. Patrick's Day after 36 years sober. So it occurred to me this afternoon and I thought, well, that's bizarre. Anyway, this poem started out in my book as a story from my Aunt Eleanor, my father's sister. And when we got to the copy editing stage, it turned out to be absolutely wrong. And the incident in it was actually something that happened to my great-grandfather, not my grandfather or my father. So we had to rewrite the poem all of a sudden. So I wanted to read it today. I've not read it before to an audience. This is called Genealogy, and it's my father's side of the family. Genealogy, the epigraph, Gary, South Dakota, current population 225. H.B. Gary, my father's grandfather, drove the first train into a small settlement. Jews named it Gary in honor of H.B., a man worthy of esteem. George Gary, my grandfather, drunken fucker if ever there was one, left when my dad was 6. 20 years later, he stumbled into a hospital in Minnesota and died in 1926 of liver cirrhosis. But I bonded with George. His daughter's whispers about him When I first was in rehab at Mercy Hospital, I learned genes for addiction are inherited, and I was hurtling to his fate if I didn't stop drinking. To drown out the sorrows and rages of my rehab mates, I told myself sad little tales, fiddling with the few facts I knew of George. A favorite was a fiction of him as a proxy for dead HB at the 50th anniversary of Gary. The mayor stood proud in a black Sunday suit on a wood platform. George, in borrowed engineer overalls, tilted in a prairie wind, dust moving like the ocean past his puzzled, roomy eyes. A new sign for the 50th read, "Gary, South Dakota was known far and wide as a place to have fun." George did have fun, and a girl in every town, and a wife and 3 kids. If I went to Gary, would I recognize an ancestral eyebrow or a nose or one of those flat Gary thumbs? Picking up a forkful of lemon pie at church supper? Perhaps there'd be old copper pots in the kitchen for beans or hearty beef stew. Beef on the hoof runs through town now and then. I'd like to see one of those cattle drives. Dusty longhorns making a stop at the lake for a long, wind-soaked drink. Cattle, like George, thirsty after all those miles run from home to nowhere they recognized. And this is another place that Andrea's story and mine connect. This is my first day as wilderness ranger in the Mount Adams Wilderness area in Washington State. It's a long hike from the trailhead to Looking Glass Lake, a misnomer for this little tub of lava rock, catching rain so prettily in the foreground of Mount Adams. 6,000 feet of lonely glacier hang there above the lake and me. Never have I been here before this long day in this green uniform with newly minted badge and name tag. I shine with bravado only possible to the truly clueless. Never alone like this, backpacking all by myself, the sun setting behind that hard-packed snow in 38,000 acres of wilderness. Little alpine flowers cling to the rock by the lake. I cling to my tent pole, thinking too much about the little pile of bear scat, blue from huckleberries. Bear eaten joyfully, no doubt. Was he ambling through this lovely scene sometime not too long before right now? I am about to pitch this tent, a few hundredths of a millimeter of ripstop nylon between me and bears, wind, snow, rain, darkness, and myriad things that walk in the night. A dead branch drops, pings against the lava rock, spits itself into Looking Glass Lake, the almost lake, and startles me. Wide-eyed, I, the almost ranger, wonder if I'll see a second day. Well, I did. And 2 more seasons actually after that. And this is another outdoor piece, which is based in Provincetown area. It's the salt marsh at Sandy Neck. The title of this is Haibun at Salt Marsh at Sandy Neck. Haibun is a Japanese form that combines a prose poem of observations with a little haiku at the end that takes off from the observation. That's a simple definition of it. Wet foot, dry foot, wet foot, cord grass, spike grass, salt meadow hay, summer greens, shade to fall gold, patched in red glasswort. We walk the marsh in each other's footsteps. Osprey nest, a marvel of twigs, rope, bits of cloth, salty grass, taste of salt on our tongues, sulfurous scent of September's decay meets briny tangs on incoming tide, killifish, horseshoe crabs, little and big, moon snails, oysters, mermaid's toenail, squid eggs, blue heron, skate eggs, deer, and this is the haiku. Names of flowers vanish just as fast as names of friends. And this is a poem. I'm not going to tell you the title of this poem. It has a little secret in it. And it is a 3-part poem. And there is something in common among each of the 3 parts. December 28, 2012, 1:25 a.m., City Hall, Portland, Maine. 2 men stand on the top step, hold hands, parkas unzipped to show matching t-shirts. Love is love. Standing below them, we cheer, wave candles. They hold up their marriage license with its gold seal of the state of Maine, first state where citizen votes made gay marriage legal. The first couple steps down into hugs, pelted by flowers. We watch for the next, prepared to cheer every pair, our voices husky with cold. And by the way, that's where the title of my book came from, and that is not the thing that's in common. Part 2, summer morning, Boothbay Harbor. Today, in the quiet of purple dawn, a harbor seal treads water 10 feet from my solo canoe. Onyx eyes fixed on me, I stare back. Watch nostrils split open, close, open. We breathe together a while. November 12th, 2016, Salem, Massachusetts. Our post office, built 1933, colonial revival architecture, so convincing, I imagine mailmen in 3-corner hats and breeches. Descend the graceful front stairs, I climb to mail another donation I can't afford. This one for wilderness protection follows others for civil liberties, racial justice, reproductive rights. What to do on this day of feeling unheard, unseen? What to do but lick the envelope, seal my check inside, stop at the bronze slot and tip the flap, feel a puff of air as my hopes land with the others there in the dark. That's the end. And the 3 things that are common through the poem is that the word seal is in each of the 3 parts. We have the seal of the state of Maine, post office sealing an envelope, and an actual seal. So that comes from a poem by Richie Hoffman, which was 3 cranes, and he did the same thing with 3 sections and 3 different kinds of cranes. It's a fun little thing to try, is what it is. Dimitri, what time am I at? I forgot.
Can you please read one more?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and this is the final poem from my book. We started with the first poem and we're ending with the final. This is a poem called Star Stuff. The apples will not care that I didn't walk this morning, nor never learned a second language, or read Proust, or was not a better supervisor. knowing that atoms of my body come from stars that died 5 billion years ago and will be available 5 billion years from now in some other body or star or drop of water or apple lying in the orchard path is oddly comforting. Red and purple sunsets from the bluff above the pond, or Katahdin on a full moon night, or Silent Night sung by candlelight, or the smiles of my grandsons will be of no consequence to a drop of water. I will be as dust drifting on a solar wind beyond atmosphere and planet, untroubled and unconscious. This much worried, much loved life, atoms strewn strewn across a galaxy of galaxies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kali. Excellent, excellent. We already have questions coming in. Kali, people were talking about the different forms that you were using and how you were speaking upon the thought process of you writing your work. And I did want to go to that at some point. I have a couple of questions of my own, selfishly as the young poet, so I'm definitely going to ask my own questions for the two of you. But there are some other questions in the comment. I did want to begin by saying this one thing. I'm going to try to make this a thing. And I want people to think about a mixtape or a playlist that would match their book. So I'm not on the spot going to ask you. I did that last time.
Good.
Kali and Andrea, throughout the course of the Q&A, while we're bouncing ideas back and forth, try to think of a couple of songs or an album that might match your work, which might be a little difficult because we have a book of poetry that has a couple of different voices in it. And Andrea, your memoir is so poetic because you are trained as a poet as well. So I know there's a couple of different rhythms and feelings bouncing off of that. But just think about that, forget about it, and then I'm going to ask you right before we leave if there's a song or two that can match your book. Okay, so first question. There's several ones coming in, so let me just scroll up and find it. Okay, someone sing a song or hum to yourself while I'm finding it. Perfect, found it. All right, question for Andrea. Was writing this book somewhat cathartic for you? As you age like fine wine, does camping still bring the same joy and connection with the universe?
So that's a couple of questions. Was writing the book cathartic? Yes, because I had to really think my way through the whole journey. And it was cathartic, but it was also difficult because I had to really revisit a lot of the pain and grief that closed adoption can bring. But for the other question, yes. Well, thanks for saying I'm aging like fine wine, whoever that was. That's very kind of you. I do still find venturing into the outdoors in any capacity very fulfilling, and it gives me this expansive feeling that I seem to only get when I'm out somewhere where I feel like open to the world. And so I do feel like even though the journey of finding my birth parents is over, my journeys outside still sustain me in lots of different ways. So I'm always seeking to get out.
Thank you, thank you. And that was from Roy Edmonds.
He's a friend, that's why he said that.
And actually, Kali, I want to ask you that same question. So was writing this book somewhat cathartic for you as you age like the finest wine? Does camping still bring the same joy and connection with the universe?
I'm sorry, what's the end of it?
Does camping still bring the same joy and connection with the universe?
Watching my daughter-in-law and my grandson go camping gives me joy. But I blew the ACL in my right knee a few years ago, and I haven't been doing much hiking since then. So I kind of gave it over to the next generation in a way. But I still kayak, and I like being outside. I really love being outside. So
Okay, so that still gives you the same joy and connection to the
yes,
universe.
that
It's
gives me
still
the
being
same joy.
outdoors, right? And
Yes.
what was this book cathartic for you? And maybe if you could explain that process to us. And congratulations
Um,
on being
thank,
alcohol free for such a long time. This is something to
thank
celebrate.
you.
You're welcome.
I don't know that the book itself was cathartic. It feels like an accomplishment. um, the whole process has changed my life. I mean, the whole process of, um, I started out by just taking Betsy Scholl's poetry workshop at USM as a lark, basically, and ended up taking it 3 more times, and then going to Greece with her on a summer writing thing with her and Mary Snell, who was another person from University of Southern Maine. And that that process opened up a whole new world for me and opened up a new life, basically. So
Mm,
I can't really speak of catharsis from what was before, because
mhm.
this is somebody else. This is someplace else that I've never been
Right,
before.
right.
So,
And that's something one you get with time, and I guess you get with like just the poetic observation, right? Like trying to separate
oh
yourself from
yeah.
that work and from that being going through that process. I didn't have a well-formed thought, but I did note how, since both of you are in the wilderness, there is something very pastoral about the work, whether or not you are in that space, and that you can see something kind of in a different lens. So I think that's really important for those of us in the city. Go out, in the woods, spend some time in nature, because it will give you that varying perspective of things. Kali, you also mentioned Betsy Scholl as someone that was really important and paramount to this book, and there are other voices that you speak of throughout your text. And Andrea, in your memoir, there's so many folks that kind of turn you in different directions in your memoir. So I would love for both of you to speak upon how important it is to honor those different voices and those different experiences that come from other people when you are finally putting pen to page and creating a collection. So, in short, how do other people influence what you then end up putting on the page?
I'd say in 2 ways. One, I really miss going to the coffee shop
Mm.
for to sit and read and listen to conversations. Do a lot of eavesdropping, and those people end up in poems sometimes, or a point of view that someone had will come in, and
Mm.
then I write something, I type it up, I take it, show it to friends in a poetry workshop, or whatever, and their comments come into the poem. I write it again, I look at it again, more comments, and eventually it seems to be kind of finished, maybe. But there are all sorts of voices that are in my poems, I'd say.
Mm. Thank you. Andrea?
That's a really good point, Kali, about that other people's voices come through via our writing groups. Absolutely. We don't really write in a vacuum, even though we have to sit by ourselves in a room and do the writing. The generation of the final thing is really a collective voice to some degree. So I would definitely agree with you about that. And then I would say also for me, the way that other people's voices come in is because I think being a writer is a lot about being a listener.
Mm.
And you have
Oh,
to
yes.
listen. You have to listen both to the humans around you, but also to the non-humans around you, the beyond human around you, for what those things are saying. And they come through us as writers in an interpretive way. And I think that that's one of the things that that I enjoy the most about writing, is feeling like I'm kind of opening myself up to listen to the world around me.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, two things with that. Like, one, how important community is, no matter how big or how small. Just being able to trust in someone to look through your writing, right, which is actually going to feed into our next question. And then also about that going back to that idea of the pastoral and kind of like the contemporary pastoral that kind of encroaches into the urban spaces and just our communities, which become our landscape with the houses and the neighborhoods, right? And being able to receive that. And I definitely think folks that spend some time with themselves and with their environment around them can have some sort of observation that others can't. And I think that's what's really poignant in both of your collections, how you're both able to listen and receive the work rather than just compose it. And this question here, going back to community and trusting our community, this is from Judy Goggin for both. How does it feel, Kali and Andrea, to become public voices within your own private thoughts? Mm.
Well, I think I said earlier that I used to do a lot of public speaking when I was with the Osher Institutes, and I loved it. I had such a great time, but it is terrifying to read my own poetry out loud to people. It's just insane. So
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I teach college for a living, so I'm always up in front of a crowd improvising and stuff, but it's different when it's coming straight from your soul. And it's scary. You know, I want to honor everybody who I'm writing about, and also honor myself. And so, and also to kind of bring a message about the struggles with adoption to people who don't know about it, or people who need to know about it. So all of that is just terrifying to me.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really walking a tightrope. Yeah.
And it's definitely trying to find the importance in what you're doing, right? Like the purpose for writing these stories and how they're going to impact others. And I mean, the way I find myself psyching myself out in my own work, if I'm trying to be vulnerable with people, is just kind of thinking of the fact that the work has a larger purpose, right? As you were saying, Andrea, with helping others, and Kali sharing your story too, with others that are feeling that same way. I feel like writers are really good at having that mask where there's that writer self and that their own self, and then they try to hold them separate because there's a bigger purpose. There's a bigger purpose to the whole grand scheme of why we do this, which is mind-boggling. We're constantly in a mode of psyching ourselves out. This question is from our Gabriel Cleveland. Question for both authors. Both books feature a search for identity and heritage and reflect on that journey through the imagery of the stars, star stuff, the floating space baby. I'm from a rural town, but now live in a starless shadow of New York City and miss that wide expanse. How do you feel such astronomical reflection influences self-discovery?
Can I
So
start with
basically,
that?
go
oh yeah.
ahead. Yeah, definitely.
So I lived in Philadelphia for a decade, and also that place is quite starless most of the time. And I feel your pain, Gabe. And I really, really missed it. And I felt like I was missing something critical to myself. And so I did escape as much as I could out into places where I could see the stars. And I sleep when I do go camping, which I try to do a lot. I sleep outside rather than in a tent unless it's raining. Because I want to be able to look at the stars. And so I love that feeling of looking up at the stars, all cozy, warm from my sleeping bag, and telescoping between feeling so minute and so connected to the rest of the universe. Like that's maybe my favorite part of being outside, is lying at night and looking at the stars and feeling this kind of back and forth about where I am in the galaxy, in the universe. And it kind of puts me in my place and recalibrates my sense of self, really.
That's great. Thank you. Kali?
Oh, I have to admit, I'm afraid of the dark. I always
Me
have been.
too. That's okay.
The thought of going outside at night gives me the willies, basically. But where I get that, I read a lot of science fiction, and I love space opera, which is, Star Trek, Star Wars, all the people on spaceships around and out in space. And so that when I think of the stars, that's what I think of. I have, sort of the galaxy view. That's not real, actually, but I don't know. That's where I end up.
Once you said space opera, I'm never going to look at the cover of your book the same again, because it kind of looks like you're jumping into hyperspace of
Yeah,
flowers.
It does.
Whoever has pre-ordered that book, when you get it, you're going to see it. You're jumping into a hyperspace of flowers. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Gabe, let me spotlight you so everyone can see it. It's literally, it's a kaleidoscope, but I just cannot see just the hyperspace, Millennium Falcon-ish kind of jumping into flowers. That's amazing. Hyperspace of flowers, Rebecca Olander, thank you. Yes. So we have two ending questions. This first one is from Patty for Andrea, and we're just about at 8 o'clock. So thank you everyone else for staying. There's a couple of questions left, so we're just going to stay for those questions and try to wrap this up. Andrea, were there issues with writing about both your adoptive family and your biological family?
Both my adoptive family and my biological family were incredibly gracious about my writing about them. They did not get in my way, which I'm really thankful for, that they trusted me enough to just let me do what I needed to do. I got in my own way plenty. Because it was so scary to think about being so vulnerable. And I wanted to make sure I was telling my story and not anybody else's story, and finding a balance where I'm being respectful and mindful of other people's realities and truths while still paying homage to my own.
Excellent. Wow. Thank you so much, ladies. You two are a force, and it was wonderful to hear both of you in celebration of Women's History Month and on the St. Patrick's Day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for St. Patrick's Day and partying with us in Cav and Carry Press. I wanted to end with this one question, which was, what do you want people to walk away with after reading your book? If they could walk away with one thing after reading your book, what would you want them to receive?
For me, it's that family is a much more expansive concept than we give it credit for in our culture.
Thank you.
It's funny, the thing that comes quickest to mind, I guess, is just a sense of peace. Like to give them a sense of peace, whatever that means. I don't know.
What a gift, ladies. What a gift. Thank you so much. If I could get a round of applause from everyone for this evening. Thank you. Just, I bow to the two of you. Oh, wait. One last question came in. I'm sorry. If you could put a song to your book, what song would that be?
Oh.
Damn you, Dimitri.
I have no idea.
Okay.
How about the Indigo Girls, Closer to Fine?
Okay.
I'll take that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Kali, you're off the hook because you have another reading next month. So
yes,
you get to think about a playlist.
I'm thinking about this.
Excellent. All right. So if anyone wants to come on in and say goodbye on the way out, please do so. Gabriel will leave the links for the books. Kali Lightfoot's book is still on sale for a 20% discount until April 6th. And Andrea's book is selling like hotcakes. Get it before we don't have them anymore. Just please get it. And if you're not following Andrea, go on her page on Facebook. Andrea put that in the link so you could see her celebration cake of the ISBN. Her cake was literally ISBN. Absolutely genius.
Hi, Abby.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly,
Patty.
congratulations.
Thank you,
Congratulations,
Betsy.
Kelly. And I'm so honored. My goodness.
Good. I'm glad.
Beautiful poems, all of them.
Thank you. You had a hand in most of them.
I love the family poems too. All those quirky voices. That's wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
And the nature ones too. Everything.
Oh, and by the way, this isn't short hair that I have anymore. For those of you who know me,
Oh, wow. It's a
this
surprise.
is my ponytail at the back.
Ponytail. Whoa.
I wanted to look a little bit like my author photo.
It's the only stuff you get. This is the exclusive stuff after the reading.
Wow.